Planet Coaster 2, highly anticipated sequel to Frontier Development's acclaimed theme park simulation game, is coming out on November 6, 2024 for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. Subscribe if you want to help out the channel. Subscribe if you don't. Also, Dragon Age, I didn't get a code. I'll be playing it right along with you guys, and we'll try to cover that in the podcast or in a video here. Firstly, it sets you up very nicely for the options. Leaping in, you see three main branches. You got your career, franchise, and sandbox. Career has you leaping into the shoes of a newcomer, taking on a series of escalating endeavors to fix amusement parks around the world. Learn the ins and outs, and unlock research for new rides as you progress, including buying extra parcels of land to build out your parks across two giant sections of land through a gap, because nothing screams safe like a friggin' Looney Tunes canyon separating your ride sections. But that's where I find the game charming, from the side stories and all the different little changes and scenarios, like fixing beat-up parks and getting them running. It's not all new stuff, but it works very well to make you buy into it. And you also have the new franchise mode. This is a part of the game that lets you build out with pals, creating franchise parks around the world. And you can do that as a team now. Then you have sandbox mode. Sandbox is exactly what you may think it is. You can adjust all kinds of settings to make it as hard or as easy as you want, with you going out and choosing which of the four landscape types, tropical, temperate, arid, and, well, more tropical. You can do that. You go out there freeing yourself of all the requirements, or set yourself up in a more challenging mode with everything turned on. Now, regardless of which one you do, Planet Coaster is exactly what it sounds like. A somewhat deep simulation of running a coaster park, trying to decide between the pull of exciting rides versus the cleanup requirements that the nausea they induce cost you. Balance the cost of a huge swimming pool and its attendant lifeguards, or just letting nature take its course and letting your parkgoers turn into dead human-shaped swimming lessons to teach everybody else. And if you notice there's a bit of a theme there about the people themselves, be aware, because while it's called Coaster Planet, it's a simulation about the movement of the characters just as much. So setting up paths and creating a nice space for your coasters is really as important as everything else in the game, because if no one can get to your sweet ride aptly named Stomach Launcher, then it's not going to matter. Paths consist of three main types. You've got your normal park paths, those restricted for the park workers themselves, and you have visitors paths. You can also queue up lines for rides, something that you're going to want to pay attention to. Controlling snap to and elevation of those paths and understanding them is vital here. But for newcomers, expect to watch customers just blatantly refuse to use a path only to find out there's some hidden obstacle or height change that's hard to find. I'll cover that in a little bit of the problems section. Now, once you have a general path to a plot of land you want to build on, you can leap into the section for choosing which construction you want, from flat rides to roller coasters to parks, pools, and merchandise. When placing a ride, you can place default versions, picked from the developers themselves. Excellent examples of what you can do in a jiffy. Place them down, and that only requires you to set up an entrance and an exit and make sure that they are all clear and make sense. Or you can go deeper, creating your own custom ride with just the bare start and stop set up, and the rest of it up to you. The entire track setup of items available to you, making sure to set up scenery also around each one, because people just don't like a bare-ass roller coaster. Because if it doesn't have the pomp and circumstance, a ride called the Child Emulator just isn't going to be enjoyable. That means you can lay down a blueprinted track, but then go in and in many ways create your own specified look to them, because you can take anything in the scenery section and place it on a car. It's just like car tuning in that way. Many start with the same vehicle, but you end up driving a dreamy, smooth-handling two-door, and your friend ends up driving a nitrous-boosted death machine. You can adjust the angle, the turn, the twist, drops, everything on the roller coaster, setting pieces out for the first big drop and then going as deep as you want, as long as you have the money and the space. There's even a handy-ass autocomplete button for when you get close to the end of the ride, but you don't want to handle the idiosyncrasies of a 90-degree turn into an invert combined with a 90-degree twist. It's a handy feature, and while it doesn't always work well, just doing it allows for you to then go back and look at the completed section and make it your own. Then you need to make sure that the ride has what it needs, including power, with you setting up generators around the park, as well as distributors to take that energy from one place to the other with a handy indicator of what's needed. The pool setups, which I'll talk about a bit more in a second, require the same thing, but they need water and filtration, so that leaky bladder Jimmy doesn't foul up the pool each time he takes a whiz in it. And the game has a nice set of decorations you can place directly over the more industrial parts of your park, though, so even if you have it near your ride, you can put some shrubbery around it and cover it with a container and make it all look nice and tidy. Now, after that, each coaster has to be set and tested first, and trust me, this is one of the most important parts of the game. One of the beginning areas has you take over a coaster park that effectively looks like something from the goddamn Scooby-Doo ending in a cartoon, all decrepit and destroyed. So the first thing I did was I went to work and effectively didn't pay attention that the very end of a ride was not complete, effortlessly flinging thankfully empty cars into the trees 100 feet beyond the track. The next haphazard moment came when I built what I considered to be the world's greatest water slide ever, which was a single drop and a single turn. However, somehow I hadn't noticed that the turn aimed at the edges of the slide's own supports. Watching test dummies shoot out and decant his nuts at 30 miles an hour by slamming crotch first in the supports like he had a family vendetta against water slides was hilarious, but also a pretty useful lesson. And something else that's useful is all the information you get after a test, including how it really scales up when it comes to fear and nausea and excitement. Also, for the first time, the event sequencer here lets you choreograph in-park moments. For example, you can shoot fire up when a car hits a certain part of a ride. There's a ton of customization, but also I love the fact that there's so many skeletons for you to lay something down and adjust things on your own. The only real issue is that combining so many groups under just a couple sorting tabs like tracked and flat and normal coaster means that one particular tab is sort of just an extras tab, and it can be really messy. It makes sense ultimately, but can be very hard to parse so many items, even with the search filter, and especially because, while there are 3 themes, they don't look dramatically different when you're seeing them in little windows. That's, of course, when the customization is going to come into it for you to make everything your own, paint them your own way, and add anything to them. So while the core overall outhouse can look disturbingly like a soft drink cellar, you can outfit that to look dramatically different when you want to take the time. Speaking of time, here's something I took a bunch of time in, and that's making the pools. They're easily constructed using the pool building tile, which allows you to place different shapes or custom shapes to create the ideal swimming area, and it takes into account space and safety. You can put wave machines in them, a couple diving boards, and call it good if you want. Or you can use the new flume system, creating huge water slides like their own watery death roller coasters, ejecting kids in the air and hopefully back into the pool. Be aware, though, that pools are their own special kind of attraction here and can require a bit more of an understanding, because it's not just onloading and offloading little bipedal wallets like the rides are. You need change rooms, and you also want to place specific kiosks nearby so that people can pay for tickets for the different pool supplies like sunscreen, awnings, and different things for shade. Once items are placed, it comes up to make sure it's staffed. What's nice here is most of the items you place auto-hire staff, especially when you turn the rides on, and they require at least one staff attendant. Though you're going to want to be able to understand how to handle breaks and scheduling, as well as some maintenance. So you're going to need some janitors, some mascots, and maybe some other staff to fill in the gaps. You can also sort out their pay, make their schedule as a taskmaster as you want to be, or assign them to rides and so forth. With pools, the staff are the lifeguards, trusted with pulling out any visitors that get in literally over their head. Diving down into this, you can set up each worker and what vital job they want to do, what aspects matter more than others. And this is all a learning experience, and one that's not always balanced perfectly because you are dealing with little simulated humans. And so that choice can turn out to be a janitor cleaning toilets versus scouting the outside of a local ride, clean up kids' insides that are now outside because their parents thought Twister was a living room game from the 1970s and not a roller coaster made by some deviant who took all their left turn lessons from watching NASCAR wrecks. That's just one ride or one pool. The rest of the game has you consistently turning out different items and making sure everything in the game world is set up correctly. Getting one ride up and running can be fast with blueprints, or you can spend hours outfitting it. But regardless of that, it's the complexity and the multi-layered systems and the tit-for-tat play there that becomes the juice. The game has a nice system for adjusting the terrain as well, sorting out flat areas, making sure your ride, which can be made to bore through the ground, is set up right. It all takes time. Then you sit back and watch and see how it's doing. And that's where the tracking systems come into play, especially when you're trying to see the interplay between multiple rides. First, on the normal game screen, you can of course see your money, the time of day, a weather forecast, and yes, weather happens to change tourists' desires to use some rides. It also shows objectives and problems in the top left for you to easily find. But you can also see a series of heat maps for mood, hunger, thirst, power, water, and so on, which is nice for getting an overview of the general park and how it's working. But you can also track every single visitor and their wants and needs to identify when they become hungry and if putting a Bob's Burger Shack in the exit makes sense, or if the visitors need more sitting areas or cover. Then you also get into the actual park manager screen, which shows you your intake of visitors, your total money, your park's prestige, which is a combination of factors including the uniqueness of your rides, as well as advertisement systems that you can use. Now be aware, the advertisement system isn't super robust. It's not tracking CTR or anything. It's just a series of steps to make sure that coaster fans know that your park has some sweet ones, as well as how big that audience is and their own current knowledge of your park as it sits. Now at some point you may want to expand, as I talked about a little bit earlier. you can go out and buy sectioned off areas of the map and then end up altering them and adjust the landscape and build onto them, expanding if you have the money and the desire. Now, what really matters here is the HUD and the controls. I'll talk about the HUD and the UI in a moment, but let's talk about the controls because this one does actually work with a controller. Obviously, with so many controls and nested menus and editors, I was actually astonished that the controller worked incredibly well for what I wanted to do. Sure, there's a bit of fiddliness here and there, but this is a console title as well, so it needs to work, and it's awesome they've kept this working so damned efficiently. And yes, of course, with mouse and keyboard, it will feel smoother, but with controller, it's not Flight Sim 2020 complicated. There's a learning curve with some buttons being pressed once for one thing or held to be a hot button for something else. It doesn't always make sense, but the setup seems to be a pretty nice combination of the most used options being always generally 1 or 2 buttons away. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Some parts of Coaster infuriate me. First, the handling of the staff and scheduling. Sometimes it's just hard to figure out your needs for staffing due to breaks and how the park runs, with different workers wanting longer hours or more work and trying to figure out how to get everybody and all the jobs staffed accordingly, as well as the direct impact on, say, removing a break from someone or hiring someone else completely. The help section worked somewhat for these things, but it's because it's a sim and so many different areas are interconnected, and sometimes it's hard to know if the issue is a lack of people or a single facilities building that isn't in the right place. Also, for heat maps, I would have loved a facilities filter because a ton of these buildings look alike. Also, if someone takes a break and you weren't prepped, hiring another ride attendant and getting them to work when the other ride attendant is all the way across the park sort of sucks. I noticed that hiring them also didn't switch them to wanting to run the ride right away. Sometimes they just walk to the other side of the park, even when I dropped them right next to the ride. I did try to drop them on the ride and on the ride entry. That doesn't seem to work. Themes also are a bit lean when it comes to the ride. You have 3 or 4 generally with Viking, Modern, and some classic sets, each with their own design. Though, at the same time, because you can take everything in the scenery tab and attach it to the rides, and you can do the event planner that goes off when certain rides get to certain places, there's a lot of customization, but it requires one step deeper than a theme itself would. Lastly, while the career mode was enjoyable, it had an oddity where if I continued past the tutorial section even for a moment, I could never advance to the next scenario without leaving the current game mode and then going into it again and loading up that section. So when it said go to the next scenario or stick around, I instantly always had to pick go to the next scenario. Didn't seem like there was an option to find that at any later time. Lastly, while you can erect constructions that look like restaurants and hotels if you want, you can't really make those things. Now that brings us to presentation a bit. First, while the game is at its core not the greatest, most amazing overworld style of game, I was actually astonished at the good details you saw when zooming in, from kids flailing around in the last moments in a swimming pool, to others vomiting on the roller coaster tracks, to mascots bouncing around on rubber balls in cow suits. The Sims kind of look to everything helps it continue to perform pretty well, but I was just surprised how much I actually love the look of the game, especially when you zoom in and watch a ton of people in the swimming pools. Really actually looks very good. But it's actually in performance, I was pretty surprised. It runs well, it's got AMD as well as NVIDIA's frame gen and upscalers, but it also has its own. Both AMD and DLSS do offer up nice improvements on the frame rate with frame gen on. There's a couple settings you can adjust for your own system as well. Now on a 4090 at 4K maxed, it had a moment or two over 90, but it was around the 90 FPS at 4K, every single setting at the highest, no upscaling. The 2080 was hitting about 75 to 80 at 2K. The frame gen added up from there to 150. The game's FSR implementation, though, is not the greatest, and it's simply due to how that system works on gradients and steps, resulting in a ton of shimmering if you were looking at longer distance areas in the game. The game takes some generous considerations as well with how it presents the crowds at times, fiddling a bit here and there for the performance. But almost every single animation you see for a character also indicates their condition. As I talked about earlier, every character in the game has some kind of want. And the animations are excellent. If you see 2 dudes doing the pee-pee dance, you're not going to confuse that with the 3 who are sunburned because they forgot to put shade up at 105 degrees. However, one big problem that shows up all the time is that if you're scanning the park and have any of the coaster item menus up and in a nested menu, the game does begin to fit and stutter, even on an NVMe and 64 gigs of RAM. That is something that you notice pretty much right away, but it gets worse as you continue to play. You might think that's a sort of a memory issue. It could be, but I didn't really see the memory raising that much as I continued to play. This is just something that, for whatever reason, when you bring that menu up and you're moving around, it's obviously doing some sorting in there and some searching to make sure that whatever you choose, you get the information right away, and that can be bothersome. It does have some current issues as well with glitching faraway geometry and shadows that can sometimes flicker. Luckily, with every single one of those issues, there were ways around it that really didn't impact its presentation. Now, when it comes to audio, I like it. You can hear the screams of kids on rides, a little burble and chortle of everybody walking around being excited. And if you want, you can go into first-person mode at any time, even while just walking, and hear the same thing. Music's fairly muted when it comes to the overarching in-game stuff, but I do like that once again, for particular rides and scenery, you can pick music for it to start blaring out. Another thing that I enjoy is voice in pretty much any game, and I love that you have it here. It's mostly in the career mode, and it's not bad. It's just a series of talking heads giving you instructions, thanking you for the job well done, or chastising you for possibly screwing everything up. It's all campy stuff, and for the first time at least, not something that I wanted to skip. I wanted to hear the information. After that, well, appreciation went down. When it comes to fun factor and appreciation, that's what these games are about. How enjoyable was it to sit down and play this game and build my own park? Games like this always run the risk of doing too much simulation or not enough, and if a game wants to walk that dangerous path between the road of both of them, there's almost a Gaussian level of options to make everything make sense to someone. So that we don't look at it and say, if I can track all these traits on one character, why can't I see exactly why they randomly burst from the entire pack who are like-minded and headed somewhere else? In a way, the macro versus the micro versus the nano kind of thing. While there were some issues here, it overall worked, because despite a couple little problems, not the least of which was wanting to punch some of these little sons of bitches off the planet because I couldn't seem to herd them alone to a particular place, Planet Coaster 2 does a really good job of working past that. Now, the UI can be confusing, especially where they've decided to put each segment and piece down in a particular area, which sometimes results in you feeling like you looked up the word math in a dictionary. Instead of a description, you see a formula for estimating liquid pressure across uneven terrain. I ended up loving it, trying to figure out how to get a maintenance man there as quick as possible, and why Billy Bob took lunch on the other side of the park. What works is just having a bit more of a laid-back attitude towards everything. You're doing your best, just not always the best. Just like any well-oiled machine, there's a day where it doesn't work. But the days that it does are glorious. That is exactly how I felt about this title. I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, deep sale, or don't touch rating system. This is a blast and is definitely worth getting right now. It runs well enough, has a huge number of options, and while I would have liked a cleaner arrangement for items, the new ways you can combine them with the additions here is exactly the kind of game I want. For newcomers coming in, it explains enough, though I wish there was a bit more of a tutorial system there that explained a bit more of the idiosyncrasies. But for long-term players, they add some stuff there that I think a lot of people will enjoy putting together and trying to figure out. Overall, an absolutely enjoyable game that I will continue playing well after this review is complete, which it is right now. I would love for you to give it a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs up if you didn't like it, thumbs up if you got this far. Leave a comment. It really does help the channel. You guys know how it is here. No BS reviews, no trips sponsored by companies, just the reviews, just the facts. Moving on. See you on the next one. Peace out.